and welcome to the Pandemic Pantry, where today we're going to be making sourdough cookies. Now, I think a lot of people are starting to get into sourdough, and maybe they've never done it before, and one of the things you've probably noticed is that you always have to feed your sourdough, which means you take out some, and you might throw it away, and then you feed it with some new flour and water. Well, this is my sourdough, and instead of throwing away the sourdough that we need to get rid of, we're going to use it to make cookies. So first thing is that we just take the sourdough out of its container, and whatever is left behind in that container, that is how we're going to continue the sourdough. So just set that to the side, don't clean it out, and now do a little math in your head to figure out how much you need to build this up to 500 grams in total. Now, once you've done those mental gymnastics, you can add in your flour and water. Now, whatever you started with, say it was 200 grams of starter, we need to bring that up to 500. So if you do 500 minus 200, you have 300 grams. So that means we need 150 grams of flour and 150 grams of water. But of course, do that based off of what you've measured, you put in. Now, as we're mixing that up, let's talk a little bit about what the sourdough is doing in cookies. Well, so sourdough is acidic, so it's got an acid in there. And when we add that acid together with the baking soda that we'll add later, those combine to produce a bit of lift. They produce some carbon dioxide. This is exactly like those school science fair volcanoes where you have vinegar and baking soda. That's what we're doing. A little bit of frantic mixing later, and we have our normal sourdough batter. Set it to the side, and let's feed our pet. Now, the way you feed it is just as you would normally. It's half flour, half water by weight. But all that we needed to keep it going was whatever was left over in that container. You don't need to keep a certain amount or anything. Just whatever was left in there, that's going to be enough. Cover it up and put it all to the side for a few hours, maybe overnight. It depends on how warm your place is. Once it gets to that same bubbly stage that we started with again, there it is, looking good. It's time to assemble our cookies. So into a bowl that has 200 grams of flour, we add in half a teaspoon of cloves, half a teaspoon of allspice, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm using a half teaspoon, so it's going to be 2 of those, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Just get it leveled out and put it in. And once it's all in there, just whisk that all together so that it's all well combined. And set it to the side. Next step, we need to cream our butter and shortening and sugar. And so we have 115 grams of shortening, vegetable shortening, and 115 grams of butter, to be combined with 340 grams of sugar, of brown sugar. Now what we're doing here is we're creaming it, which means that we're going to be pushing together all that sugar into those fats, and that's going to create kind of an airy texture. It gives a bit more lift because there's some of those bubbles in there. And you know that you're done when it's all well combined, it's a bit fluffier, and it's changed color, it's a little lighter. So once it's all combined like that, get our sourdough back, add in about a teaspoon or so of vanilla extract. And then just combine all of that, just dump it all right into the butter mixture. Scrape around a little bit to make sure that the butter will get away from the sides of the bowl. We want it well combined in here. So just stick that spatula down, scrape things up, and just generally manhandle it. It's okay. We're just going to beat this into a pulp. All right. Paddle down and start that thing going. If you need to, scrape it up again. Just make sure it gets well combined. So we've got some rolled oats. We got 234 grams of rolled oats that we'll just whisk together into our other dry ingredients. And once that's all together, we'll put this into the mixing bowl as it's going in a few batches. If you do it all at once, it'll just go flying everywhere. So do it in a few batches. Once it's nicely mixed together, just do a quick check. No dry bits anywhere. Nope, nothing at the bottom. So we're good. Now we need to add in 150 grams or so of raisins. I have a combination of raisins and currants and some dried orange peel. And that was a nice combination. Any dried fruit you have. Now at this point, the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to form it into a log and then cut it. So I've put down a piece of parchment paper and now just plonk that dough onto the parchment paper. It's going to be pretty sticky at this point. See what you can do, get it down on there, and then try to smooth it out into a bit of a log shape. Don't go all the way to the edge because we're going to do this next step. Do that, and then just use a sheet pan to kind of push it back a little bit. We're trying to make it into as good of a tube as we can. Put it onto a sheet pan, and then let it chill for a few hours. I let it chill overnight because it was getting late, I was getting lazy, but it comes out and it's nice and solid. I'd noticed mine had kind of deformed. It wasn't really a circle anymore. And I tried to roll it to get it back. It really didn't do much, so you probably don't need to bother with that. And now it's time to just cut it up. The reason I went with this method is because you got this really easy way of divvying it up. You have it in that parchment paper, now you just cut it. My first cut turned a little oblong. I'm not trying to make biscotti here, so I don't want long pieces, I want circles. Try to form it back into the right shape. Well, so if I do it on the side, that might work a little bit better. And lo and behold, it looks a bit like a square, but that'll work. That'll do. So cut out however many more you can fit onto your pan. I could only get about 4 onto this pan. It's a fairly small pan, and I didn't know how much these would spread out. So there we have it, and those go into a 190 degrees Celsius oven for about 12 to 15 minutes. And while those are cooking, put the rest of the dough back in the fridge so that it doesn't warm up too much. And about 12 minutes later, our cookies come out, and they're looking good. So move those onto a wire rack so that they can cool. They'll start out pretty soft, but as they cool, they'll firm up some. And they're pretty tasty. So they come out this very almost cake-like texture. They hold together really well, though. So I made a second batch. I decided that I could actually fit a few more onto the sheet pan. I could get 5 onto the pan. You can see how I'm doing it. I also figured out that if I wet the knife in between cuts, it works a little bit easier. So the rest of them, I didn't want to cook them all at that time, so I just put them into a container. I have these little sheets of plastic that I can reuse. I just put them in there and threw that whole thing into the freezer. And now I can just take them out whenever I feel like it, cook one, cook a few, or just eat them raw. Because you know what? They don't have eggs in them, so I'm not really afraid of salmonella or anything like that. And there you have it. Sourdough cookies. Now you can make use of all of that sourdough that maybe you've been throwing away. So this has once again been the Pandemic Pantry. I have a few more videos about using your sourdough leftovers planned, but in the meantime, I just hope everyone stays safe.